We should begin now then.
Okay.
All right, let me begin real quick. So, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Freddy Gipp. I'm the digital program manager for Humanities Kansas, an enrolled member of the Apache Tribe of Oklahoma, and your co-host, along with Dr. Valerie Mendoza, a native Kansan who earned a PhD in history from the University of California, Berkeley, and who is currently serving as the director of Title III Strengthening Institutions Grant at Washburn University here in our state capital. We would like to welcome you to another season of The Big Idea, a monthly online series that highlights fresh thinking on humanities topics through brief essays and online interviews. Last season highlighted Black scholars in Kansas, emphasizing past and present work and how it has impacted their careers and communities. And for this season, we are transitioning our focus to elevate and explore Indigenous scholarship in Kansas. Today's big idea, finally breaking through the current state of Indigenous storytelling, centers around Indigenous representation in the film and pop culture with Wichita-based filmmaker, graphic designer, and writer Rodrick Pocowatchit of the Comanche, Pawnee, and Shawnee nations, whose contribution to the film industry and discourse on increasing representation of Indigenous storytelling comes at a perfect time when productions like Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs have made significant strides in breaking industry barriers. So the format for this is we will allow, so there's a Q&A function towards the end. So if you have any questions for our speaker, Rod, we'll answer those towards the end. And how this will begin is before Rod speaks or after Rod speaks, or I guess whatever, Dr. Mendoza will begin her questions and then I'll follow with mine. So Rod, thanks for coming today and discussing your big idea. Please take the time to introduce yourself to those in the audience. And after that, we'll begin with Dr. Mendoza's questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you for having me. I loved being, I'm Rodrick Pocowatchit. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. Like you said, I'm a graphic designer, journalist, filmmaker. I grew up in Kansas, although my family is from Oklahoma. So I was very happy to be approached about this subject because it's something I've long been championing for is, to see more natives represented in mass pop culture. We are just the least represented across the board in all aspects of artistic endeavors. So I was really happy to be approached about this subject. I've made 4 feature films. I've made, I think, about 23 short films. And I like to put my characters in stories that you might not normally see a native person in, like a zombie film or a time travel movie or a sci-fi superhero comedy, so I just think natives need to be represented more, but not just in like typical stories that you might find them in as like, mystical warriors or a Western, we're just like everyone else. We run out of gas just like everyone else on the road. So I think there's just so many stories to tell and we just have a different kind of perspective to come at it from our native backgrounds.
Definitely.
Thank you. That is a perfect segue into my first question, Rod. So a lot of your big idea, finally breaking through the current state of Indigenous storytelling, talks about the importance of cultural representation. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why this is important in communities of color and especially the Native community.
Well, I think it's just the cool thing I think about the show Reservation Dogs is that it feels like an inside job. Sure, there have been stories about Native people, but they haven't been told by necessarily always been told by Native people. So it doesn't exactly feel authentic some of the times. But shows like Reservation Dogs, it was something I could relate to. Felt like it was speaking directly to me and something I could communicate, connect with. And I just think people need that identity. They need to see themselves represented in stories. We're all fed the same pop culture machine that is open to just thrown at everyone, but we're not seen in that. And I think seeing ourselves represented gives us not a sense of worth, but a sense of identity. That we matter, that our stories matter. So yeah.
Yeah, I was actually at a talk the other day and somebody was the speaker was talking about this study that was done on natives in TV characters, and that they analyzed all sorts of TV characters from 1987 to 2007, right? So several decades of television TV characters, and out of the over 2,000 plus TV characters during that time period, only 3 were native.
I believe it. It's too bad, but I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to, what you were saying about lack of representation. It's almost like an erasure in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think what's cool about Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs is that the networks took a chance. I mean, I think we've not been represented, not because we're being ignored, but they don't think, I mean, it's a business. So they don't think that we're going to, buy into that we're going to watch this stuff, whatever it is. So I think the cool thing about those shows is it's hopefully opening the gates for more stories like that being told by Native Indigenous people in stories of the way they want to tell them. What I also think is cool about Reservation Dogs is a non-Indigenous person watching it might not get all the humor, or get some of the inside references, but it didn't feel the need to explain. It just presented it as is. It wasn't, trying to exclude anyone. I think it was just giving people the chance to experience something new and figure out or research what is a meat pie, or something like that. But I think what's cool about, like I said, with that is again, it feels like an inside job, and it's like, hey, that's something I know. That's wow, my grandma makes meat pies, or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, and we actually in the chat, we just put the trailer for Reservation Dogs. If people don't know or haven't seen it, you can watch that. My son and I just finished the first season this past weekend. The first thing he said as soon as we were done was, "I hope there's a season 2."
Yeah, there is going to be a season 2. They just announced that.
Excellent. Excellent.
But what I think is cool about Reservation Dogs also, I mean, it's like I said, it's funny, but it's also, I mean, it tackles some weighty things, like substance abuse, teen suicide. I mean, it doesn't shy away from those, and it doesn't color code them either. So and it's very powerful. It's very emotional. I mean, that couple of episodes in there, I was sort of devastated at the end of it, but I didn't feel like I was, tortured or anything. I just felt like, some worthwhile stories were being told and addressed.
Yeah, and in your essay, you mentioned a little bit about how it's not just the actors that are Native, but also, the writers, the producers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's the first show ever to have an all Native writing and directing roster, which is exciting. I think is really cool because again, in a lot of ways, it feels like, yes, finally, we're here. I mean, we're not, but it's a step in the right direction. But what's cool is like there are Native writers and directors out there working in the trenches, and this is just another avenue for them to be seen. I mean, sure, they're working and they're telling their stories, but again, like I said, we're all fed the same pop culture massive machine, and it's tough to break into that. There are some Native film festivals in around the country, and the American Indian Film Festival has been going for 40 some years, but people just don't know they're out there, but they are, and they're showcasing works by Native artists. But I think what's cool about Reservation Dogs is, yes, it's using all Indigenous talent behind and in front of the camera.
Yeah, when we were preparing for this panel, Freddie and I were talking, and one of the things we were talking about is how in the past, non-Native actors have played Native roles, right? Mm-hmm. So for example, this past summer, my son and I, we watched Thunderheart, where Val Kilmer is playing, a Native FBI agent. And we were speculating, would that fly today?
Well, I mean, I think there's a movement to not do that anymore. I think they're starting to realize that there are Native actors that could easily fill those roles. But again, it sort of comes back to marketability. I'm sure Val Kilmer was cast because he's a well-known name, an actor, maybe. But again, I think just people just have to take a chance on Native actors and Native talent. I mean, it's out there, it's there, and it's good.
Yeah, and we certainly see that in Reservation Dogs for sure.
Yes. Yes.
So Reservation Dogs and your work as well tries to defy stereotypes of Indigenous people. So can you walk us through some of those stereotypes that your work has been trying to counter?
Sure, just some little pet peeves of mine that I just sets off my alarms is like, so a camera cuts to a Native person and suddenly you hear flute music. It's like, no more of that. And then, that stoicism, just that, Natives are just stoic and don't talk about their feelings or share anything about them. Things like that just really get to me. The headdress, I mean, is a very revered thing in a lot of different tribes, but they just throw that around on anyone, just like it's just a hat to wear. So just little things like that, just sort of I want to see come to an end. And I think it is a little bit. I think now there's a different mentality about it, just across the board. I mean, everyone's trying to be more culturally, correct in all kinds of different races. So I'm hoping that keeps going with native stories, also Native characters.
Definitely. So, what are some of the challenges facing independent filmmakers today, and how have you adapted to those specific challenges?
Oh, well, it's tough being anything creative. It's hard because it takes money. So it's hard to find funding. Like I said, there are Native artists out there working in the trenches, but they're also right alongside a bunch of other artists that are also trying to get their work seen, and we're all vying for the same set of eyes. It's just tough to get recognized. But now even more. I mean, it unfortunately is a business, like I said, but it takes money to tell these stories, to make films. So that's tough. I mean, I've always done it with very little. My films are very low budget, very grassroots, and I've always kind of liked it that way. Also, just because it's mine, I have control over it. So that's cool. But just in general, just being a filmmaker is tough because it's also a team sport. I mean, I can't do it all on my own. So you have to rely on other people's help, and it's cool because I built up a crew and cast of sort of regulars that I use over and over. So that's cool. But it's just tough in general to be a filmmaker in today's world, just because there are so many. Well, it seems like it would be the opposite. Now there are so many different ways to be seen on all of the apps and channels and everything, but also you're fighting more content alongside of you to get noticed and be seen. So
Yeah, definitely. So in one of your films, Red Hand, you dive into the concept of time travel. So what inspired you to develop that story, and where do you hope to see the plot of Indigenous Futurism take place within the film industry?
Oh, well, like I said, I always try to put my Native characters in movies you might not typically see them in. And I don't think I've ever seen a Native time travel movie. So I kind of wanted to do that. And one thing I kind of do is I always approach some of my favorite films and think, oh, how can I make a native Shaun of the Dead zombie movie? Or how can I, so one of my favorite films of all time is Logan's Run. And it takes place in the 21st century. Well, this is way back in the 70s when this started. And so, and I love sci-fi, I love horror, I love genre films, but this was definitely a sci-fi genre film. And I was kind of inspired by, I wanted to make sort of a native Logan's Run, but that's not a time travel movie. But I thought, I always grew up loving this movie, transporting myself into that era, that time. So I just sort of kind of went with that idea and wrote Red Hand. And what Red Hand is about a man who has the power to heal, and he time travels from the future to our modern day time to save someone who's going to save the native race in the future. So yeah, and I also wanted to incorporate a bunch of different elements into the story. It includes animation. It includes different storylines all in one. And I also wanted to incorporate other genres into it, you know, design a web story with it, things like that. So I really, with this one project, wanted to try to tackle a bunch of different aspects of storytelling in one idea.
Yeah.
I really like that idea because, you know, so often, especially in films coming from Hollywood, right, we see natives as being stuck in the past, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then the other part about futurism, I think going forward, I do want to see how, I want to see how Native people evolve in society in the future. And so I think stories about that would be good, you know, it'd be positive. What some of my films approach is that, so in my film, The Dead Can't Dance, the zombie film, the natives are immune to the zombie virus that breaks out. So they're the heroes. And in the film, society lives on because of the native people, because they donate their blood, tribal doctors come to the rescue. Yeah, so I kind of want to show native people in a positive light, definitely going forward into the futures.
I love that because it shows like not just the resilience of the native people, right? But you're also like, you know, I mean, we know how European diseases devastated the community, right? So you're like turning that on its head. And
yeah, it's kind of funny how irrelevant it is now. I never envisioned that, but yeah, I mean, we just had an 11th anniversary screening of it here in Wichita, and it was cool to revisit it again. I hadn't seen it in a while, but so in The Dead Can't Dance, I also wanted to approach some different things that without hitting people over the head with the message. I mean, a lot of the film takes place in a school, so I wanted to speak about how history wasn't exactly taught right from the native perspective. Things like that. I talk about some, you know, family, like it's two brothers and a nephew. They have to put aside their differences to survive. And that's kind of what native people do. I mean, they might bicker or they might have different opinions, but when it comes down to it, if something's happening, they all get together and they support each other and they get through it. And then, you know, part ways and keep arguing or whatever, just like everyone else does. But yeah, every other family in the world. But yeah, so.
That's one of the things I really like about Reservation Dogs, right? Because everybody's an auntie or an uncle. And through a few episodes, there's this running bit where one of the main characters is met this older woman, and she thinks he's her grandson, and he's like, you know, I'm not your grand. He just keeps on telling her in every different episode, you know, I'm not your grandson, right?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, you are.
I know, and I thought that, yeah, and I thought that was really touching. You know, I thought that was a nice touch to the story.
Oh, same here, man. That brought tears in my eyes because we all felt that. Because, you know, we have grandmas everywhere. You know, pals we go to, film festivals, events. You know, we always got grandmas looking at us too, and that's just how it is in the native culture. So about that, how we're able to fit with everything. What is it? You know, everything. Was it the shift in, you know, in who's leading, you know, our nation, or just the rhetoric in regards to, you know, how we're being more hypersensitive to stuff? You know, what pushed this edge to where now there's this focus on natives? Because I just saw a Gap commercial that featured a native woman. She was speaking her own language, and I was like, man. And then there was a two-spirit couple that's featured on Nike, and so it's like, you know. And then I had some friends who dance who were featured on an Adidas campaign, and so they're power dancers. And so it's like, well, what is this? You know, what do you think, Rod, that is this shift, you know, this paradigm shift that we're starting to understand that, hey, you said it before, we've always been here, but why is it now taking, you know, till the 2021 for them to realize that?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. We've always been here, but I think shows like Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs definitely shook things up. and put us back on the radar. That's why I was so excited about it when I was watching. It was like, oh my God, this is something. This is gonna do stuff, you know. And the only thing I can kind of think about why it's cool to be Native right now, I don't know. It just caused something. It woke something up, and I think people are just wanting to tap into that energy. And it's a perfectly fine time. I mean, it's perfectly fine, but now it just seems to kind of be like there's something in the air that's changed, or that there's some sort of energy moving forward. People are tapping into, and I think seeing Native people like this represented so matter of factly, and in a good way, wants people to do that more. You know, I think like the ad campaigns and everything, they're figuring out that there are those people out there. So we need to show them, and I think it's great. I'm really excited about it. So I hope it keeps happening.
Yeah, and I think what helped us is that we were able to have such like movers within our communities like Deb Hallen and everybody, you know, reaching monumental heights to where people started recognizing, because once that recognition is there, people will start to realize like, hey, like, you know, there are these problems that have been here for a while. And it's really cool to see these shows bring that, you know, to the forefront. But another thing is that, you know, like the African American community, they have like so many shows like Blackish and all those other things. And then there was the Asian community that had Fresh Off the Boat. That was a pretty funny one I liked. When do you think we'll already see something like that for Natives? You know, something that strives away from not from the SCOTUS and STUDIS, just the regular stuff, without making it seem like we're fully assimilated.
I don't know. I just don't know how that's going to happen, or if it will. But yeah, like I said, I mean, it's just cool to see ourselves represented in some way alongside all of those shows, just because it sort of validates us, makes us, you know, we're part of society. So seeing ourselves recognized in that way, I think is important, and I hope it keeps going that way. So.
Eileen commented in the chat, I think the importance of having more Native American stories in film and TV and popular culture now is not just having Native Americans see themselves represented, but in having more stories told from the Native point of view. The benefit of advocating for diversity in all professions, including the arts, is that different stories from different points of view are being told. And
yes.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your start in filmmaking. I did some research, both Freddie and I researched you before this panel, and I was reading your IMDb page, and I was telling Freddie, I've never met anybody who had an IMDb page, so I'm like totally fangirling over here. But yeah, so how did you get your start in film?
Well, I had a huge theater background in high school and college. And back then, I mean, I graduated from college like 89, 90, somewhere around there. So trying to figure out what I wanted to do in college after high school, I wish, I mean, at that time, a kid from Kansas didn't just go to film school, you know, like it is now, like anyone can make a film anywhere. But back then, that just seemed like an unobtainable goal, you know. So I never pursued that. Got a graphic design degree, started working at a newspaper in Kansas, the Wichita Eagle, as a designer, illustrator, graphic artist type job, and was doing pretty good. And then somewhere around, I think I was around age, like late 20s, I was getting kind of restless and decided I wanted to pursue filmmaking, and was debating on whether or not to quit my job and actually go to a film school, or just figure it out, jump in and figure it out. And that's kind of how I just do everything. I just kind of just do research and figure it out and get my hands dirty. And this is also about the time when the digital revolution was just beginning to start. People were just now starting to make films on digital cameras versus film. So I thought, well, this is interesting. You know, this is something I can pursue. So decided to write my own script. I've always written on my own stories, different things. And then I started writing for the paper. I started covering music. So I decided to write a script, and all the research, the screenwriting mantra is write what you know. So I grew up dancing, going to powwows, being stuck in a car with my family in these long trips every weekend. You know, and inevitably, it was like a little movie unto itself every time, because it was like a little adventure. Like you do run out of gas going to a powwow, or you know, you do break down, or you know, something always happens. So I thought I'll set my story in this powwow world, and I wrote a story about this this man who is struggling with guilt after the death of his mother and can't bring himself to dance again. And so this powwow is holding a you know, like a 1 year, you know, memorial for his mother, so he has to go. So the story is about them trying to get to this powwow. They do run out of gas. They meet some funny characters along the way. So yeah, so that's the story I wanted to tell. Along the way, I got involved with the Sundance Institute, their screenwriting program. They had a native screenwriting lab at the time. So I found out about it at the last minute. I was like, oh, well, I have a script. I'll just send that off, just thinking nothing would come of it. But I got accepted. And then I worked with them, sent them my rewrites. And from there, I got into the main screenwriting lab that happens during the festival. That's an astonishing thing to get into. I mean, it changed my life. It's highly competitive. So being there with my first script was a life-changing experience. I mean, they really teach you about soul searching and figuring out your characters and figuring out your stories. And I still use everything I learned from that experience in everything I write today. So yeah, it was just a life-changing experience. And I met all these actors and people from all over the film world. And then I decided to make my film. I decided to do it with my own money. I decided to direct it, even though I hadn't directed anything. I mean, I had started doing a few shorts to experiment, but I decided to write it, direct it, and hired a cinematographer from Alaska, hired a production manager from Idaho, actress from LA, just different people I met at Sundance. Brought everyone to Kansas to make this film. My family was camping out and by Council Grove, Kansas. That was my crew. But it was a horrible disaster. It failed on many levels, and it just wasn't working. People were fighting. I wasn't getting along with my actress. It wasn't good. So I shut it down, threw everyone back on a plane, sent them back to wherever they came from, and then I just kind of mourned, the passing of my film, because it was devastating. I mean, it was really, really devastating. So I left it alone for a long time. I thought, I don't give up. It's like, I'm not going to give up. So I approached it again. I rewrote it a little bit, recast it with people I knew, friends and family as crew, shot it in a couple of weeks on my friend's farm in Council Grove, Kansas. And then that was my first film. And for the longest time, it didn't do anything. I would send it off to festivals and it just kept getting rejected. And that was a new side of filmmaking that I hadn't dealt with either. But anyway, so about a year after we had finished making it, it got into the American Indian Film Festival in San Francisco. And then I was nominated for some awards and I won a special jury award there. So, and then after that, that film just kind of kicked off. We had a good festival run for about a year. That very festival, someone approached me from the Smithsonian in DC, Indian Museum in DC, wanted to show it that next week. So, it just kind of just took off for some reason, had a nice little journey. So that whole world, that whole process of that first film, from conception to promotion, it was all new to me. It was a lot to figure out. So it was like a movie itself. It was a journey that had its ups and downs and highs and lows. And so it was definitely a journey worth taking. So yeah, from there, I decided to just keep going, experimenting, trying different stories, trying to get better at the creation of it. So yeah, that's about it. Sorry, that was long.
No, that was perfect. That was really powerful what you said about the powwow stuff, because I dance. I actually am really good friends with your nephew, Cheyenne.
Yeah.
And but that's the thing, though, you meet people and those are stories within stories too. So a little bit about your work. I saw that on your site. You were part of the Only Good Indians.
Uh-huh.
And so that right there, that was with Kevin Wilmot, who actually won a recent awards from KU. And so you had West Studi, and then you had a Winter Fox Frank and everything. Can you kind of talk about the inception of that and your involvement?
Sure. Kevin is great. He's a really great guy, but also just incredible talent. Yeah, he won an Oscar for writing Black Klansman with Spike Lee. Somehow they approached me because they were going to shoot some scenes in Kansas, in Wichita, and I think the production manager got a hold of me, or Kevin sent me an email, or so. I can't quite remember how I got approached, but they wanted me to be one of the extras coordinators. And I said, okay, yeah, sure. And then I had to help set up auditions that were coming here. And that was my first involvement with a union set. All of my stuff is not SAG, it's not union. So that was my first experience with on a union set. So it was a new experience. It was a new experience unto itself. It was really cool. I loved it. It was so awesome. And they also needed to cast some roles, so they cast me in a small role. So that was my first also union acting job. So I'm union eligible. I'm SAG eligible. I haven't joined SAG because it would add a different layer of complexity. If I kept wanting to act in my own projects, it would just be a lot. But yeah, so I worked on the set, I think, for a couple of weeks, maybe three weeks, while it shot here in Wichita, mostly at Cowtown. And then from then on, it went to different places in Kansas, and I didn't go with them. I couldn't. I can't remember why. But yeah, that was really great. It was a great experience. I got to work with one of my good friends, Delana Studi, Wes's niece. We were in a scene together. It was really cool, and got to know Wes and the rest of the cast. It was just sort of a magical experience. I still treasure that experience today, and learned a lot. Again, learned a lot from just being right there and. Being, like I said, there's a huge cast. There was a lot of extras to coordinate. And again, I was just kind of thrown into that job and had to kind of figure it out as I went along. It was a little rough at first, but I picked it up right away. And yeah.
So for those that aren't familiar with the film industry, it's all about your like if you have the budget, some locations are more better than the others, but can you talk about like the states that provide incentives for the filming? I understand like Georgia's pretty good for some aspects, but can you kind of describe like where Kansas fits along with that in regards to filming?
Sure. I'm a little not up to date on the current status of that just because it changes a lot. Yeah. But yeah, Georgia has a good incentive program. New Mexico has a good incentive program. Oklahoma right now has a very good incentive program, and they're kind of booming in the film industry side. I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's film, was just shot there. So some high profile stuff is getting made out of there. So they're doing really well. Kansas at one time had some sort of incentive program, and I think The Only Good Indian was a part of that. I mean, I think they took advantage of it, but I don't remember the specifics of it. Kansas also had, I think they still do, have a filmmaking program out of Topeka. I think they still do, but I'm not sure. And they've helped us a lot, like get different locations. Like you were talking about locations, they helped us. Like they shut down a rest stop for us, on Kansas. I mean, on the highway one time for us, and just helped us in numerous ways. Helped us find, a hospital room for a location, things like that. Film Commission. It was the Kansas Film Commission. Peter Hasso was the director. Awesome guy. So I don't think Kansas still has an incentive anymore. I think it got lost in the shuffle, but I think there are some movements to try to get that made, especially with our neighbor Oklahoma being such a booming, business right now for film. I think somewhere along in the waves of Kansas, I think they're trying to bring that incentive back. But that'd be awesome. That'd be great.
Yeah, speaking about films and incentives, so you have your own film festival coming up next month, and that's really impressive. I really liked what you said. I think it was on your website or how you started, that there's no excuse, you just got to do it. You just got to get out there and do it. And that right there, I really believe in that, because for me, that was the same thing that I did in Lawrence. When I'm trying to do my research for powwows and stuff, we just did it. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk a little bit about that drive and what you hope to see, this film festival turn out to, because it is the inaugural one, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk, there's a lot of process and planning and all that. And especially where you're going to be at with the Mid-America Center too. I think that's really exciting. So can you kind of talk about, the beginning plans, any hiccups and stuff, and just pretty much it overall?
Yeah, sure. No, it's going to be called the Alternative Film Festival. It's going to be held November 12th through the 14th at the Mid-America All Indian Museum in Wichita. Yeah, it's the first one. I approached them last year about it, and they were super excited about it and thanked me for coming to them with the idea. And they're like, of course we want this. Yes, please do. You can have our facilities, do whatever you want. So they've been really supportive and really open about it. So of course, the world blew up last year, so that got put off. And so I approached them again this year. I was like, hey, can we try that again? I really want to keep pursuing this. And they was like, oh yeah, definitely, go ahead. So, and the cool thing about this is, well, for me, the first year I wanted to curate it just from all of my travels and filmmakers I've met over the years. I've become really good friends with some of them just because we keep popping up at the same places. Our films get in alongside each other at different festivals, different places, and we've sort of become this core group of filmmaker friends. So it's nice to have that support group, of course, but it's nice to have to be able to show those films. So yeah, I'm super excited about the lineup. I've got films from all over the country and Hawaii and Canada that I've selected. So yeah, and the cool thing also is, like, I wanted to start a film festival because I thought there needed to be another avenue for these stories to be told, to be seen. Like I said, there are festivals out there, and people don't know about them, maybe, but I wanted to be another avenue for that. So I thought that was exciting, just to be able to support my Native filmmaker peers and give them another avenue for their work to be seen. So I'm super proud of that. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but I've been to so many festivals now. I kind of knew how I wanted it to be shaped, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do. So going in, having that experience, I couldn't have done it without having that experience behind me. I think it is a different animal unto itself, but I'm super excited about it. And the cool thing, at least in Wichita, that's another thing. I thought Wichita needs to have this because we have the Indian Center there. The Keeper of the Plains statue by Black Bear Bosun is Wichita's iconic, that's on their flag. It's on their flag. I mean, it's the highest statue in Wichita. So there is a Native presence here already, and they support Native people already. So I just thought this is a perfect place to have that. And so I did a Facebook teaser post, I think in July or something like that, and it got shared like hundreds of times, like 400 times or something. And people were like, "Ah, this is an excellent idea. I can't wait to see this. Let me know how I can be involved." So already there's support for it and encouragement about it. So I'm just really excited to see how it plays out and how it's how it happens. I hope it happens well. I'm trying to make that happen, but it is a lot of work, but I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, well, the only way you can go up is up from here. So
yeah, I mean, it's too late. It's gonna happen. So yeah. I just have to go with the flow, and yeah, and I also want to enjoy it. I don't want to get too stressed about it. But yeah, it's gonna be cool.
Julie asks, from our audience, how did the Indigenous storytelling tradition inform or influence your interest in filmmaking or other media? She's curious to hear your thoughts on the ways film or TV might be an extension of that tradition.
Yeah, for me, it's just, yeah, we are storytellers. We have storytellers in all of our tribes, and there are legends, things like that, that could get told from generation to generation. So I think we were already storytellers, and I think that just sort of adapted to different forms of it, like movies or art or music. One thing that I thought was cool about Reservation Dogs was the Dir Woman episode. That's a legend that's been told generations, from a very long time ago. So I think it was just kind of cool to see that integrated into that modern story. So yeah, I think the stories we grew up being told do weave themselves some way into our work, whether it's full blown, telling a legend, or if you have that thing about you. And another thing about like crafting Native characters, at least for me, is that they do have that about them. So like in Red Hand, the main character, the healer, he doesn't talk. He can't, but a person goes with him that can understand him, not necessarily read his mind, but can understand him. And growing up, my grandpa told me specifically that long time ago, when tribes were on their own and would go hunting, they couldn't yell, hey, there's the enemy over there, or there's a deer, or whatever. He said they would just think it, and the other person would get it, knew it. He said it wasn't telepathy exactly, but they just couldn't explain it. It was just there. He said we still have that. We still have that innate ability, that innate sense of being able to communicate with someone without having to speak. And I thought that was interesting. I just really always thought that was interesting. So, I incorporated that into Red Hand, and I made the main character not speak, because every time he spoke, it hurt him. It took away some of his power to heal. So he doesn't talk, but he does communicate with this person that was sent to go with him back in time from the future. So I think little things like that, stories we've been told, come with us and are represented in our stories in some way, not necessarily, full blatant legends, but I think some aspects of stories we've been told growing up do find ways into our stories now.
Yeah, that's how you knew it was pure with Res Dogs, when they talked about Deer Woman. Because when I saw that, I got kind of creeped out because of all the stories my grandma and mom would tell, because they're from Carnegie area, they're from the area where she was going to. And I was like, oh, and it was in the time frame too when they were there. So that right there resonated with me. And I was like, cool, because non-natives, they can see, we're not just making stuff up. We're not, there's some weird stuff, but there's some weird stuff by the communities out there at night too, especially in Caddo County. But no, that's a really good subject you brought up.
Yeah, and I was really surprised to see it in there, because that's always been kind of taboo,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying too. So they went full in. I was like, man, that's crazy.
I know. I was really surprised. It was cool to see it, and I loved the way they did it. But I was really surprised because I know some people who won't even say her name after dark.
It went from a comedy to straight horror after that.
Yeah, right.
So, do we have any more questions for our guest?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them.
Do you you don't have to tell us anything, I know it's proprietary, but are you working on anything for this film festival new, or what do you got in store?
Well, in Wichita, our Tallgrass Film Festival is this weekend, and I have a new short. It's going to have its world premiere in that festival. It's going to be in the horror and bloody shorts program on Saturday, October, whatever that is, 23rd, I think. So I'm also busy with that this week, promoting that and going to that. It's a great festival that happens here. I'm really happy to see the way it flourished. I think it's the 19th year, something like that. So it's become one of Wichita's favorite events, I think. So I have that this week, and then my film festival. But after that, I'm going to return to comedy. I had a short called The Incredible Brown Indian, and I definitely wanted to do a full-blown comedy, which I hadn't quite done yet. I mean, some of my films were humorous, but I really wanted to approach a comedy. So I shot this short film called The Incredible Brown Indian, and it's about it's about an ordinary guy who just decides to become the world's first Native American superhero. He doesn't have any powers. He's just a comic book geek, but he decides to become a superhero. So he puts on a tight suit and, and tries to, solve crimes, whatever. Anyway, that had its world premiere at the LA Skins Fest in Los Angeles a couple of years ago. And it was an opening night. It was at the Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Theater in LA. And we just had such a great response to it. I mean, people just loved it. And it got a really good reception at other film festivals. And we just got such a great reaction to it. I thought, well, that's why they make sequels. So I decided to turn that one film into a trilogy. And we released episode 2 last year. And I was hoping to do episode 3 this year, but it just didn't happen with everything going on. So we're going to shoot that in the spring as episode 3. And from there, again, I'm trying to approach that from different storytelling, different ways of telling a story. So there's going to be a tie-in comic book. There's going to be, you know, tie-in other aspects of the story. And I'm maybe thinking about creating a universe where the incredible brown Indian, you know, travels around the country, goes to schools, sees native kids, things like that. I'm trying to kind of make that into a franchise. So yeah, that's on the horizon. That's all I have planned at the immediate moment, but I have some other scripts and ideas I'm working on.
Is his villain going to be? Is his villain or arch nemesis going to be diabetes or something? Or
that's awesome. No, it's the ultimate villain is revealed in episode 3, and it's going to be a cowboy. So it's going to be like cowboys versus Indians. But it's been a lot of fun playing around with that. I mean, talk about making fun of stereotypes. I mean, the brown Indian character in the films, I've had a lot of fun just sort of you know, having him go against stereotypes. And also, I mean, like I said along the way, I like to make some commentary about how things haven't maybe been taught right in schools, or how natives are resilient. So it kind of says some things along the way, but without hitting people over the head with a message. But yeah.
I love that. I love the whole franchise idea. That's awesome. So in your big idea, you mentioned some novels and that people could read. And as you were talking, I was also wondering, what are some of your favorite movies?
Favorite movies about Native people, you mean, or with? Yeah. Well, the first one I can remember being impactful on me was Little Big Man. In the 70s with Dustin Hoffman and Chief Dan George. And I just remember how funny it was. You know, the Chief Dan George character, it was very funny. And I remember thinking how cool that was because we're funny. My grandpa was hilarious. I mean, you know, so yeah, I just remember thinking, wow, that's us. Wow, you know, we're funny. That's cool to see that. And not knowing it at the time, I was just a kid, but that was something I related to. That wasn't, you know, a cardboard cutout character that I didn't know this at the time, but that was one of the first ones I really liked. Of course, there's Smoke Signals that really changed things, that shook up things. That's about all I can think of right now. But yeah, I may have a ton of others. I just can't think of any right now.
Yeah.
What about other films that are not focused on natives that have made an impact?
Well, I'm a Star Wars geek. That changed my life. So yeah, Star Wars. I'm huge on sci-fi. So Star Wars was huge. Close Encounters, things like that. I'm also a big, huge Alfred Hitchcock fan. I've done some direct homages to some of his scenes in some of my films. I'm a big fan of, and he is too, of course, about not showing everything. What you don't show is scarier than what you do, because people make it up in their heads. So I learned a lot I studied all of his films. Some of the other directors I admire are Pedro Almodovar, Spanish director. All of his films have such a sense of place about them, and just a fluid movement to them. I really like that. Danny Boyle is another of my favorite filmmakers, just because his body of work is so eclectic. You know, he's done horror, he's done comedy, he's done fantasy. I mean, he just explores all these different realms of storytelling. Of course, you know, Steven Spielberg, of course, you know, just things like that.
We have a question from Leslie in the audience, and she says, on Reservation Dogs, I absolutely love Willie Jack, and the hunting episode was my favorite. Do you think Indigenous representation also broadens the way gender is expressed?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I think in it, you know, also expanding the storytelling that's that's told. Yeah, I hope these characters are explored more. There's not much out there yet. That I know that there are some stories. There are some LGBT stories that I've seen, like Big Eden was a nice romance about this Native man sort of realizing he had these feelings and then coming to grips with them and pursuing them, and it was told in a very tender way. So I think, yeah, again, there are those stories out there. I just haven't seen many of them yet. I hope they come. I hope they happen. But yeah, no, I think I'm hoping again that Reservation Dogs has opened up the doors for more, not just Native storytelling, but also that kind of Native storytelling about those kinds of characters.
Yeah, me too. I really anticipate that this is like the tree. You know, they always talk about coaching trees and stuff, success,
Yeah.
people branch off. I'm really hoping that, you know, the writers or the producers or whoever, when they break off, you know, they start making their own things, and we're used to this now, you know, because this is monumental. You know, what a time to be alive, you know, especially for being in the digital age, filmmaking. You're right, everything can be viral at the instance of your hand too, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
So let's see, we're kind of winding down towards the hour. Do we have any other questions for the audience for Mr. Pocowatchit? If not, we'll wrap this up. So Humanities Kansas is a leading movement of ideas, and we're happy to have you join today. Thank you so much for coming to The Big Idea featuring Mr. Rodrick Pocowatchit. If you enjoyed today's conversation about Indigenous representation in film and pop culture, make sure to check out next month's Big Idea featuring Dr. Melissa Green-Bly, an enrolled citizen of the Miami Nation, an associate professor of the University of Kansas, William Allen White School of Journalism, as we discuss how the media plays an important role in crafting narratives when focusing on Indigenous issues, both past and present, while examining how tribes and organizations are working together to provide their own information outlets on Thursday, November 18th, 2021 at noon. Thanks again. Thank you, Rod. Thank you so much for taking the time. You know, really insightful. Someone in the comments said that this was, let's see real quick, the wonderful conversation, eye-opening program, you know, so I credit that to you, Rod, for your experience and everything too. So,
well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good day, and we'll see you later. Take care.
Bye.